OK，咁我哋今日咧呢個講座繼續開始啦，所以我們現在有這個講座就今天就開始了，所以要大家講一下，我們現場講的時候是用英文，然後用
呢個係 online 嘅。
在現場的時候，就是我們講英文，然後有這個普通話的翻譯，然後呢，如果你在現場要聽那個廣東話的時候，我們有這個耳機給你，你們有需要聽廣東話的嗎？有冇人想聽廣東話嘅現場？廣東話使唔使？冇 ，OK 好，然後呢就在現場呢，希望你都把你的手機關了，講的時候就不要又講的時候又講得不好嘛。好，然後呢，我們這個七鎖的密碼，如果第一次過來，七鎖密碼是322，如果你們要去的時候按這個322就行了。好嗎？所以今天我們還就歡迎我們的專家過來，跟我們講一下這個題目，就是了解一下，如果你走之後啊，有什麼選擇？對，這時間交給他了，好嗎？我們歡迎他們。
廣東話冇得聽啊？
廣東話喺線上邊喺網上面我哋冇翻譯，唔好意思。
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. The weather is very beautiful out, so it means a lot that you come sit inside with us during such a topic that might be challenging for a lot of families.
欢迎大家今天来到我们的讲座。今天天气非常好啊，阳光灿烂，大家还能够花时间和我们坐在一起了解这一个非常挑战性的话题，感谢。
Oh, wonderful. Before we get started, I thought it would be nice if we did a land acknowledgement here in the Pacific Northwest. We live in just an incredibly beautiful area, and it's really thanks to the generations of stewardship from a lot of Indigenous folks who put a lot of love into this land. So we'd like to acknowledge that.
下面就是那个致敬环节了，就是大家都知道我们西雅图的名字是来自于那个印第安那个酋长的名字哈，所以顾名思义的话，这片土地原先是属于土地印第安人的我们向他们致敬。然后这边的未被承认的领土，它们属于海岸塞利西人、杜瓦米西部落和苏培米西部落。
Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording today, so don't worry about scrambling to get all your notes down. You'll be able to watch the recording again later, as well as receive a copy of our slides for your reference.
先下面就是讲一下我们这边的会议规则哈，请所有的朋友把你们的那个手机处于静音状态。另外的话，我们有同时在线的一些听众哈，所以我们的演讲正在录制。在线的朋友，如果你们有什么问题，可以在对话或聊天框中提出。我们最后的话会有问答环节，所以大家有什么问题先记着哈，等一下一起问。
Okay, and we know that the subject people have lots and lots of questions, but we're going to have you hold on to them until the end of the session. We'll stay as long as we need to answer all of them. But like I said, we'll have you wait until the end. So the folks joining us online, feel free to drop your questions into the chat or use the Q&A feature, and we'll address those questions at the end as well.
就是刚才我讲的，就是今天的这个话题，大家肯定会有很多很多的问题，都是可以理解，因为跟大家息息相关，所以我们会最后有问答环节啊。
And if this is your first time meeting us, hello, my name is Beverly. I'm the Communications Director over at People's Memorial. We're the oldest and the largest memorial society in the country. We were founded 86 years ago, right here in Seattle.
我叫 Beverly， 我是服务于就是这个纪念协会叫人民纪念协会，对，我是属于交流部门的，所以这个是我们美国最古老也是最大的纪念协会，于1939年在西雅图成立。
Our nonprofit provides funeral education and consumer advocacy services to all Washingtonians, and to date, over 220,000 folks have become members.
我们就是说，为所有的那个华盛顿州的人提供丧葬教育和宣导方面的工作，已有22万多人参加了我们的协会。
And when we think about what we do to support all those folks, community education, just like this, is our priority.
我们的工作主要就是像我们现在这个社区教育，这是我们的优先工作方向，包括就是像目前我们正在进行的课程和提供一些免费的资源。
In addition to coming out and offering classes like this, we post free information on our website and our different social media platforms. And we're in the process of creating a landing page that will host all of our resources in Chinese to make it even easier for everyone.
对，就是我们的免费资源就是包括就是今天讲的这个关于这些丧葬服务的一些内容我们的网站上提供各种各样的信息和资源和表格。对。
So in addition to the education work I mentioned, the advocacy work we do, we work to support our state level legislature and sometimes even our federal legislature to do a couple things, to increase the options for the types of care available to people, as well as to improve the transparency in the funeral industry. But also, we really think it's incredibly important to create more protections for people to practice their important cultural rights relating to end of life.
除了教育的工作，我们还有一个主要的工作就是进行游说我们不光游说州政府我们还游说，有的时候还会游说联邦政府。主要的话就是针对什么，比如说增加我们那个照护临终关怀照护的选择性，提高这个丧葬服务的这个价格的透明度，以及保存就是大家在这一方面的传统文化仪式。
In addition to all of the work, we really are guided by this fundamental belief that everyone deserves equal access to affordable and dignified care at the end of their life, whether they choose to be cremated or buried, or as we learned today, even composted, or if someone would like to pursue aquamation. All of these things are, all of these things are held in equal regard by us. We're not going to try and convince you to choose anything. Whatever you want is the right choice.
我们的信念就是每一个人都应该平等的获得可以负担的丧葬服务。就是目前就是说，除了传统的一些丧葬，比如说像火葬土葬，我们还会尽量的提供这个大家感兴趣的一些新的丧葬模式，比如说像水葬或者自然有机还原这些方式。对，下面都会讲到。
So we do record these sessions. Like I said, you'll be able to watch the recording on YouTube and we'll post it on our website as well. As soon as those recordings are available, we'll share those with Oliver so that you can have those to review anytime. We'll be back again next week to talk about estate planning as well.
就是说，刚才我说了，我们今天的会议呢正在进行录像，之后的话会在他们的网站，包括 YouTube 上面都可以看到。同样的道理，就是说以前开过的一些会议，你们都可以在网站和 YouTube 上查找内容。所以今天没有来的朋友，大家可以知会一声，可以在他们的网站或 YouTube 上查看。
One last thing I do want to add is a lot of times people hear the term estate planning and they think, I don't need to do that. I'm not wealthy. What do I care? Honestly, I really think that the information in there is helpful to everyone, no matter how modest their resources might be. There's good information you could learn about how to protect yourself and your assets.
今天我们会讲到一些，比如说提前规划一些，有人会想我不是那么的有钱我不需要操这份心但其实每个人都应该了解这方面的内容，然后进行有效的规划。
Before we get started, I'd like to say thank you to Emily Billow, who's here from the Seattle Public Library. It's partnering with her over these last several years that has made this series possible here. Emily, are there any updates you'd like to share from the library?
首先我们要感谢一下西雅图公共图书馆的 Emily， 她是这个老年人项目方面的主管。我们想问一问 Emily 有什么补充的
Okay.
We have this flyer in the back if you would like to go to any of our other Chinese speakers.
Okay, so Emily brought a bunch of different resources to share with you all today. There's a flyer in the back that advertises some upcoming programming being offered by the library in Chinese. as well as a whole bunch of planning paperwork in the background that you can pick up when you're ready to head out, and that'll help with some of the things we'll discuss today.
Emily 手上现在正在发的一个传单上面就是我们西雅图图书馆下面将要进行与大家相关的一些活动啊，这些都是有中文翻译的。然后后面的话，今天讲的内容会有一些表格可以填写的表格，后面的话也都会有，大家都可以去拿。
All right, so that's enough for me. We're gonna welcome Rachel today. She's also from People's Memorial Association, and she's gonna be teaching today's class. So join me in welcoming Rachel.
大家欢迎 Rachel， 她也是来自于人民纪念协会，她今天会是今天讲座的主讲人。
You, Beverly. As Beverly said, I'm Rachel LeBlanc. I am the incoming Communications Director for People's Memorial Association. And I have formerly been a funeral director. So I have helped hundreds of families go through the process of making arrangements for their loved ones. So I'm honored to be here today to help you all make your decisions for your funeral planning.
谢谢 Beverly， 然后我的名字是那个Rachel， 好像刚才说过的，我是即将就任的那个联络部门的那个情况，然后我也是那个人民纪念协会的那个员工。其实我以前呢，就是有担任过一些葬礼的情况服务，然后是帮一些人呢，就是为他们亲爱人过世的时候呢，去做一些的规划和安排的。然后我今天非常荣幸能够来给大家提供这些的信息来分享你们的那个选择。
So first and foremost, what we'd like to tell you is that death is not an emergency.
然后第一个事情，然后也是最重要的一个事情，我想要告诉你们，就是说死亡不是一个紧急的状况。
The process of dying may have included some emergency, but after death, just know that none of the process should have the urgency that an emergency does.
死亡的过程它不是一个紧急状况，当然它可能有部分的情况是比较紧急的，但是在那个死亡发生之后呢，它的那个不应该是一个需要紧急处理的一个状况。
As I tell families, maybe you were up late, needing to go to the hospital with your loved one, being by their bedside. Take that next day, catch up on your sleep, get some rest. The funeral home should work at your pace. So don't ever feel like you need to be rushed through the process of making arrangements, and just know that sometimes the process does take a little bit longer than families expect. The death certificate might take a week to arrive, but just know that none of the process should feel like an emergency.
就像我跟很多家人说的，然后可能就是在那个家人即将去世的时候呢，你可能要在医院留到比较晚的时候，然后可能需要在他们的那个床边去帮他们处理一些事情。但是即使是有这些情况存在呢，你还是可以在隔天就是补充一下睡眠。那个葬礼服务的人员，他们是应该按照你的那个时间表去帮你做一些工作的，所以这些的过程呢，你都不应该感觉是一个很匆忙的一个情况。然后很多的事情呢，可能比家人们他们想的那个时间处理的时间可能要更长一些。比方说像那个死亡的证明，他们在发出的时候可能时间会比你想的要长一些。
So that funeral home that you're working with, what's their role in the process? As I mentioned, the funeral home is working with you, working at your pace. So select a funeral home that offers what you want within a price that fits your budget, first and foremost.
然后那个殡葬服务呢，他们在这个整个过程当中的角色是怎么样呢？他们主要是提供一些你想要的服务，然后是按照你可负担的那个价钱去提供你适合的服务。
And in the process, the funeral home is going to serve as handling the care of your loved one's body. So they'll transport from the place of death to their mortuary, and then they will also help you through the paperwork filing the death certificate with the county and the state, getting the authorizations and the permits for what you have selected to do as far as cremation, burial, or the other options we'll talk about today.
葬仪馆在这个过程当中，他们会负责一些什么样的服务呢？可能他会帮你去做一些遗嘱的处理啊，比方说从一个死亡就是尸体的所在处，然后去运送到一些火葬或土葬的一个场地。然后他们也会帮你处理一些的文件啊，比方说如果你要申请那个死亡证书的时候，他们可以帮你向那个郡的政府去做相关的申请。然后有什么授权文件是需要他们处理的话，是会帮忙处理的。
In the process, what is called the next of kin will be determined. The state has a hierarchy for who is considered next of kin if you haven't designated an agent to direct the funeral home with your care.
然后在这个过程当中呢，他们会有一个叫近亲的一个这样子的选择，就是如果你在那个之前没有指派一个那个代理人去帮你做相关的处理的话，那么在法律上面呢，我们会有一些的优先次序去决定谁是你的那个代理人。
I'll talk more about the designated agent in the next slide. If you haven't designated one, then the state would consider first your spouse to be who can tell the funeral director what to do.
在那个指定那个代理人的那个选择呢，我们会在下一页会提到。然后在我们现在说的呢，我们会首先说一下，假设如果你之前没有指定一个代理人的话，那么州政府呢，他认为你的那个第一的那个帮你做决定的人是谁呢？将是你的在世的配偶。
If you no longer have a spouse or don't have a spouse, then it'll be a majority of adult children. And that means, say you have 3 children, at least 2 out of 3 need to agree to what the funeral home will be doing. If you die before your parents, then it becomes your parents if you don't have children. And if your parents are no longer around and you don't have children, then it'll be the majority of your siblings. Similarly to the children, you have more than 2 siblings, it needs to be the majority, such as 2 out of 3.
如果你没有一个在世的配偶的话，那么接下来会帮你去做选择的，就是那个成年子女的大多数。比方说，如果你有3个在世的子女的话呢，他们就需要2个不同一个去这样子去帮你做决定。如果你没有成年的子女可以帮你做这个决定的话呢，那么下一个的优先次序将会是你的父母。如果你没有在世的父母去帮你做这个决定的话呢，那么接下来的顺序就是到你的那个成年你的那个兄弟姐妹，然后兄弟姐妹也是有他们的大多数来帮你做决定的。
You may also have a court-appointed or self-selected guardian to be that person as well.
除此以外呢，那个下一个就可能是那个法庭指派的，或者是你亲自指派的一个代理人。
The good news is, here in Washington State, you are also able to direct your funeral yourself by filling out this disposition authorization form or a similar sort of form, such as maybe in your will, specifying what you would like to have happen.
在华盛顿中呢，好消息是你可以自己去选择你那个葬礼的一些的服务的选择。你可以在那个文件当中填写一些像这样子葬礼选择服务的授权书，也可以在你的那个遗产规划里面呢，在一些相关的文件去指派你那个葬礼的服务的那个选择是什么。
Emily has very helpfully laid out translated versions of these.
Emily 呢就非常帮忙，她已经有帮我们准备了一些中文翻译的一个文件。
This form in the front that People's Memorial has put together, you can put on your name and then which of the options I'll be discussing today you'd like. And you can even specify who you want to have, say if you have cremation, who your remains will be received by, if you want to be buried, which cemetery, specifics like that.
然后在我们那个第一个文件上面呢，我们今天有那个中文的翻译版本哈，然后他们就是关于那个遗体处理的一些授权书，然后你在上面呢就可以，比方说填写你的名字，然后接下来是填写你的那个希望那个遗体是由哪个单位去帮你做处理的，然后你的那个埋葬的那个选择是什么，比方说是可以土葬、水葬或是其他的选择。
And if you have your wishes in writing ahead of time, you have the form that you've written them on, signed and witnessed, dated with both of those signatures. That's legally binding. Makes it easy for your family. They can just hand the form to the funeral home and say, here's what mom wanted. Good to go.
如果你有事前去把你的那个愿望去把它记录下来，然后在一个书写的那个表格上面，在这个2个见证人的见证下签名，然后那个上面有填写日期的话呢，那么这个表格呢，或者这个文件就是一个有法律效力的文件。如果就是在你过世以后呢，你家人就可以直接把这个文件递给那个殡仪馆的人员，然后他们就会按照你的那个意愿去帮你做处理。
Here in Washington state, you are also able to appoint a designated agent who will oversee the care of your arrangements with the funeral home. This would be appointed on a form.
在华盛顿州，你还可以指派一名指定的代理人，这个人会监督你在殡仪馆时的身后事的安排。这可以用一份表格来指派。
And this would be a trusted person who would honor your wishes, someone who you had spoke with about what you would want. The designated agent supersedes all other next of kin and has the final say.
这也会是一名你信任的人，他会尊重你的意愿，而且你也已经跟这个人说过你的意愿。这名指定的代理人会取代其他所有的近亲，会有最终的决定权。
On a form, such as this one provided from People's Memorial, you would assign the designated agent, and we also have space to assign an alternate designated agent should the first be unable to fulfill the need.
在这份表格上，比方说这份由人民纪念协会提供的表格上，你会任命一名指定的代理人。我们还会有地方让你任命一名接替的指定代理人。万一第一名无法履行职务时，第二名可以接替。
Let's discuss what the 5 legal options are here in Washington state. We have cremation, burial.
让我们讨论一下在华盛顿州的5项合法选项。我们有火葬、土葬、
alkaline hydrolysis, natural organic reduction, and full body donation.
碱性水解、自然有机还原，还有全身的遗体捐赠。
The prices for each of these options varies widely across Washington state. People's Memorial Association did a price survey and found that with funeral homes charging their own prices, there is a 770% difference between the lowest cost funeral homes and the highest.
这些选项每项的价格在华盛顿州各地有着非常大的差异。人民纪念协会曾经做过一个价格调查，发现对于自己制定价格的殡仪馆，最低价的殡仪馆和最高价的殡仪馆之间有着770个百分比的差异。
With what everyone is quite familiar with, cremation.
我们先从大家比较熟悉的火葬讲起。
I say quite familiar with because here in Washington, about 80% of our population chooses cremation.
在我们华盛顿州哈，大概有80%的人其实都是选择这个火葬的，所以这就是我为什么说大家都比较熟悉的方式。
This is actually quite high for the nation. But I think people like it because of the simplicity. Some belief systems prefer to do cremation, and it does tend to be the lower cost option.
大家做这个选择是因为就是说它的这个大家比较熟悉这个流程啊，这个流程比较的简单直接。另外的话就是费用相对来讲稍微低一些。
The photo that we have here depicts a little bit of the personalization that can be included with cremation. On the left, you have a little bit of a fancier urn, more simple wood urn next to it. And on the right, you actually have handmade paper mache urns that are used for water placements, where your family can take the ashes in that and place it into water.
大家看一下这个就是骨灰盒的那个样式哈，这其实还是比较符合个性化特点的。有那种比较传统的简单的木质的，也有像那种金属质有色的。另外右边的这两个像纸包一样的，其实就是自然降解的，是用于水葬，就是说它入水之后会自然的融化降解。
I'll talk more about the water situation in a second.
我们之后的话，我过会儿就会讲到水葬。
First, some frequently asked questions about cremation.
我们现在讲一下火葬的常见问题。
So families and religious communities may opt to do a witness cremation. And what that means, you're not actually going to see any part of the cremation. You'll be allowed to go to the portion of the mortuary where the cremation machine is at. You watch your loved one be placed into the machine and the door closed. So it's a really meaningful send-off for many.
家属呢和一些宗教的团体呢是可以去见证火化过程，不是说就是看到就是说你的亲属朋友遗体的整个火化，而是说你看着他被送到那个火化间，被送进那个机器，然后看这个，然后就是见证就在那个机器外边见证这个过程，这个就是对于很多人来说，可能就是一个很好的照顾。
And further in those meaningful choices, families may also choose to place items to be cremated with their loved one. I've seen a whole range of things from, dressing them in their favorite outfit to putting on some of their favorite knickknacks. The only limitation really is that the machines cannot handle glass or batteries, but everything else should be able to be placed with the person into the cremation machine.
家属呢是可以将一些个人的用品和亲人的遗体放在一起火化，这可能就是比较有纪念意义的一些，比如说逝去的亲人他们所钟爱的服饰，还有一些其他的个人物品。但是呢，总的来讲，玻璃和那个电池是不允许被放进去。
The entire cremation process takes about 4 to 6 hours, depending on the machine and the person.
这个整个火化过程大概需要4到6个小时，就是看这个机器的这个功率问题。
And one of the questions we do get asked every so often is about gold fillings.
大家经常会提到的一个问题就是，逝者他的那个牙齿当中那个精致的那个填料。
So gold fillings are actually a blend of metals. They aren't purely purely gold. And so that metal amalgamation or blend gets cremated with your body. So at the end, there isn't really a piece of gold that the funeral home is going to run off with to the bank. And if families are insistent that they want the gold filling back, there are some dentists out there who may be able to do the extraction, but it's very rare.
就是 因为我们说的那个精制填料，它其实是一个就是组合精嘛，所以它那个在火化的过程当中，它最后会留下来。然后就是殡仪馆的话会把这个放到银行，但是如果家属的话坚持要把这个精制填料取走的话，通常如果有牙医在场，他才能够提取这些填料。但是这种情况有，但是非常的稀少。
Other implants, such as pacemakers, those would be removed since they have a battery in them. But if you do have titanium implants, those will be taken out of the ashes and recycled. Some crematories do allow families to reclaim those, but you would need to check with the funeral home because each crematory has a different policy for titanium implants.
大家那个就是像那个有的东西就是人体内部装的，比如说像那种心脏起搏器之类的东西，在火化前都要被取走，就是说因为它那里面有电池。还有一些就是像那个钛合金方面的一些仪器设备，在你的身体装在你身体这儿的话，也是要被取走的而且家属是可以把这些东西取走。
Okay, so once the cremation has happened, you receive as family or friends, next of kin, the box, the urn of ashes. There's different options that you can do. We saw the urns earlier.
就是说你的这个骨灰的话，你的近亲的话是可以取走，然后撒在自己的土地埋葬。这些东西是不需要获得特别的许可的。
But you may also elect to scatter the ashes on land. So the rules basically are that you may bury or scatter ashes on your own land.
就是刚才我讲的，放在你自己的那个土地上，有的人是选择撒在自己的土地上，或埋葬于自己的土地。
You may scatter on somebody else's land as long as you have permission from them.
也可以撒在别人的土地上，但是你必须得到土地所有者的许可。
Or popular options also go to a national or state park. They do require a permit. It's a very easy process to apply on the specific state park's website.
我们中国人对于山水有非常大的热爱，所以有的人会选择把自己的骨灰撒在国家公园和州立公园的美丽山水之上。这些东西都是要获得特别的许可，但是并不是很难申请。
Mentioned earlier, you may also decide to place your loved one's ashes in water. Mentioned with those paper urns, to refresh your memory of the photo there.
另外的话，刚才我们提到了骨灰也是可以撒在那个水中的，比如说是我们这边的可以航行的水道都是可以撒的。刚才我们看到一个像那个信封一样的那个纸质的一个那个像文件袋一样的，那个就是可降解的一个容器，也是可以放在这个生物可降解的容器上，在渡轮上进行撒放。
There are other urn options too. We have one that is made out of bamboo and I say kind of looks like a spice jar that you can scatter into the water too.
就是刚才提到一个另外一种容器，就是放在那个竹子的那个容器当中进行那个撒放。
So basically, the state wants to make sure that if you are going to do a water placement, that it's a navigable waterway. So basically, that has some flow to it, like the ocean, a river, stream, not a lake or a pond. A stagnant water is not allowed, but flowing is where you should place them.
就是我们州的话，他想要确保的一件事情，就是撒放的地点的水道是那种可以航行的，也就是说，它那个水流最终是汇聚入海的，而不是说是一个就是说相对静止的水域，比如说小池塘湖这些几乎是在流动水道中。
We have our Great Ferry system here in Washington. And they actually do provide a service where if you give them a heads up, I think it's at least a few days ahead, you can actually plan to have a ride where they'll stop the ferry, announce that there's a moment of silence for your loved one, they'll blow the horn, and they'll allow you to place contained in an urn like this, the ashes over the side of the ferry to go out to the sound.
刚刚讲了，我们华盛顿州有很多的这个渡轮哈，渡轮上也可以进行这样的一个撒放的，但是你们要提前几天告知渡轮公司，他们会对你们的时间地点进行相应的安排，在渡轮上会举行一个小小的仪式，他们会在某个水域停下来，然后鸣笛，然后向乘客所有的乘客播报，我们现在正在进行一个骨灰撒放的仪式。然后会把你装有这个你亲人骨灰的这个可降解容器然后放入水中。
All right, a new option that was legalized in 2019 and began the following year in 2020 is alkaline what did I date from? Okay, for some reason that doesn't sound right to me. Is alkaline hydrolysis.
我们就是最新的一个就是丧葬模式，就是叫碱性水解。2019年通过，然后2020年大概那个2019到2020年就开始操作，叫碱性水解。
This process, if you say cremation is fire-based, alkaline hydrolysis is water-based. This is a type of machine that's used for the process. You can see it has a very hefty door as the water is pressurized in there.
顾名思义哈，火葬是用火进行，然后水葬是用水进行。大家看一下，这就是水葬的一个仪器。它的那个门是非常那个厚的，非常到时候就是说会进行严格的封闭，因为里面的话那个水在高压的作用下会进行那个操作。
You may hear this option under easier names to say than alkaline hydrolysis, such as water cremation, aquamation, green cremation, dissolution, and it's not included on there, but resumation as well.
大家看一下，碱性水解是它的一个相当于比较正式的名字，就是大家可能也会比较熟悉它一些，就是说其他的一些简称，比如说叫水火葬。叫水葬，有的时候叫绿色火葬，或者说是直接简单一点就是溶解。
So what's going on in that machine for this process?
这个机器当中会进行什么样的一个过程呢？
Basically, it's accelerating the natural decomposition that would happen in a natural burial, where your body is reduced down to the building blocks of life. Salts, amino acids, proteins.
就是说，通过以下的要素进行就是逝者身体的一种自然的分解，通过水流，通过高温，通过碱这个化学物质。
And it does this using the pressurized water flow, temperature, which was very high but not boiling due to the pressure, and then also some alkalinity. The alkaline compound used is about 5 to 10% of the process, so it's mostly water that the process uses.
就是水在高压的作用之下会进行就是流动冲刷，然后的话水温会相对比较高，但是也不是说沸腾的状态。然后碱在整个水当中的含量大概会是5%到10%，所以最主要的成分还是水。
Here's another version of a machine that processes alkaline hydrolysis. You can see a depiction of what it looks like inside, just like in cremation, one person at a time, you're laid on the tray and put into the machine.
其实这个跟火葬的那个机器其实是很类似的，就是每次有一个人的遗体会躺在这个机器当中。
So when the process is done, the fluid that results is safely handled by the mortuary, and your family or friends receive a end result that is not an ash like cremation, but is similar.
然后就是在这个过程结束之后呢，你的那个葬仪管理人员呢，他会去把那个水，就是那个液体去做一些处理。然后家属的话呢，他们会看到一些，就可能跟那个骨灰看起来是类似的，但是它又不是骨灰那样子的。
To show a side-by-side comparison, so you see cremation, which you might be familiar with already, is sandy, it's ashy, it has more of a gray, thick tone to it.
然后呢，这是并列的比较。然后在左边呢，我们看到的那个火葬出来的那个骨灰呢，它就比较像沙子一样的，它有比较灰的那个质地。然后呢，摸起来的时候呢，它可能会有点那个比较沙沙的感觉。
And then after alkaline hydrolysis, what's left, which is the bone material, as said on the last slide, the calcium phosphate. It's whiter. I'd say it's more like a flat, like a flour, like a baking flour consistency.
然后在左边呢，我们看到的就是在水解之后的那个残留下来的那个物料的一些的东西，然后看起来它会比较白一些。它的那个东西呢，就是那个磷酸钙，然后它的质地呢也会比较像面粉一样。
And as you can see, you do get about a third more than you do with cremation. So that comes in handy for families who want to divide the remains between multiple family members, perhaps do scattering with some, and then placement at a cemetery with the rest.
然后那个分量大家也能够看起来，就是如果是水解的话呢，它的剩下来的那个分量呢，可能就比火葬剩下来的那个要多那个1/3左右。然后有一些家人呢，他们可能会之后考虑到，就是每个家人都取部分的那个灰，然后拿来做一些纪念，或有一些其他的用途，比方说去做一些撒灰的活动，或者是那个做一些埋葬的那个活动。所以如果就是在家人有这个需求的时候呢，他们就可能会考虑到那个分量的那个因素。
And on that note, you can do basically the same that you can do with cremated remains. So you can scatter on land, as we discussed, scatter by water, place into an urn, bury at a cemetery, exactly what you would do with cremated remains.
就是刚才提到的，然后剩下来这些灰呢，我们的那个可以处理的方式呢，也跟火葬是类似的。然后我们可以做一些撒灰在那个土地上，或在那个水航道里面呢去做一些撒灰的动作，或者是我们可以把它放在那个骨灰盒里面做一些纪念，或者是去在那个墓地里面去做一些埋葬。
And one of the questions that we get asked are the remains safe to handle for, say, placing into an urn or scattering? And they are. Technically, you could handle them with bare hands. I don't know if I'd recommend it because they do have that kind of powdery consistency.
然后很多人比较常问到的一个问题呢，就是说具体我们那个剩下来那个物质，我们是否可以安全的去做一些处理？然后那个答案呢是可以的，主要那个遗体本身呢，它没有一些什么病原体或疾病的话呢，我们是可以直接用我们的那个手去接触那些东西都是没有问题的。但是可能你考虑到的一个问题就是说，如果它本身的那个材质是比较像面粉一样的材质的话，你可能就不会想要去用手去直接接触。
But yes, absolutely safe to handle with bare hands. The remains from that last slide are considered 100% pathogen and disease-free after the alkaline hydrolysis process. So it is actually, go ahead a few slides. It's considered so safe that multiple academic institutions actually use it for handling their own bodies after, say, research programs.
但是回答那个问题上那个剩下来那个物料呢是可以用徒手安全可以直接接触的，它是没有那个病原体或一些其他疾病存在的。 然后因为这个方式相对安全的原因呢，在很多的那个机构，他们在做他们的那个研究之后呢，他们也是用那个水葬去做一些相关的议题的处理。
It's not a new or untried technology. In fact, some of these institutions have been using the process since the 1990s.
水葬它并不是一个新的或未经试验的一个技术，然后事实上呢，它从那个1990年代开始呢，很多的那个机构已经是在使用这项技术了。
And in fact, it was first patented back in the 1880s by a farmer who was looking for a safe and efficient means to handle his livestock bodies. So yes, even though it's been legalized only recently here in Washington, it has been around for almost 150 years.
这个技术呢，这项技术呢，它其实并不新它可能就是在那个18多年的时候呢，他已经有一个那个农夫去发明出来了。然后他那个发明的原因呢，是去做一些他的那个动物的遗体的处理。然后他是当时取得那个发明专利的。然后之后呢，他这个是比较近期才是在华盛顿州去有一个合法化，去用来处理人类遗体。所以呢，这项技术它已经存在了150多年了。
So why would someone choose alkaline hydrolysis over, say, cremation or one of the other options? It is considered a gentler and more respectful process, as again, you're using a water bath versus flame.
那为什么会有人去选择这个碱性水解的这个方式去处理呢？其中的原因可以包括是它的这个过程是相对来说比较温和，还有是显得比较尊重的。另外一个呢，它就是不排放那个有害的温室气体。
It's also more healthy on the operator of the machine versus cremation. The operator would place you into one of the machines you see in the photo of, start it up, and then it runs, versus cremation, where there are harmful greenhouse gases being emitted, and there is some danger to the operator during cremation.
然后这个方式呢，也对操作机器的那个人相对来说是比较健康的。如果在那个火葬的时候呢，那个操作人员他可能就会在操作那个仪器当中呢，会吸入一些有害的那个温室的气体。然后在那个水解的过程当中呢，他们那种温室气体的释放相对来说会比较少的，所以对他们来说是相对健康的。
It also uses much less energy than cremation. Depending on the type of machine, it can use only 6 to 10% of the, or pardon me, 1/6 to 1/10 the energy that cremation does.
然后它使用的那个能源呢，也是相对的少的然后按照不同的仪器它可能那个使用的能源不同但是一般来说呢，它可能会是那个土葬的它可能会是那个火葬机器的那个1/6或1/10的那个能源消耗。
It is a bit slow to catch on, though. About half of the US and about half of Canada have legalized it so far, and it is also catching on internationally.
然后在那个国家它认可这个方式的整个过程呢是比较缓慢一点的。目前为止呢，在美国我们大概有1半的州份，还有这个加拿大或者是大概1半的州份是认可这个方式的。然后在国际上呢，是其他的国家也在慢慢的去承认这个方式。
This is a funny little photo to throw in. This is our colleague since retired Dion Strummer. He is very important in the furthering of legalizing the process. As you can see, he was very excited when his machine was installed down at his mortuary in Oregon.
然后这个也是一个比较有趣的照片，想要跟大家分享一下。那这个呢是我们已经退休的一位同事他在那个推动这个殡葬方式呢是比较做了很多的那个工作的。然后就是在那个方式他通过了以后呢，然后那个葬仪馆他最终是有了这个机器以后呢，他就拍这张照片去做纪念。
like cremation, you can do a witness alkaline hydrolysis. Very similarly, you would be taken back to that portion of the mortuary. You'd watch your loved one be placed into the machine and the door close. The machine start. Again, you don't see any of the process. There's no hole to look in through the machine, but you can have that final send off, just like with cremation.
在这个过程的当中呢，家人也是可以跟那个火葬的时候是有一些相同的那个送亲人的一个方式的，可能就是说让你在另外一个房间里面，通过那个窗户去看你的家人，就是那个机器送进去，然后就是你也可以有那个按键的那个动作，所以它的这个用这个机器去做那个水解的方式的时候呢，跟那个火葬的时候，亲人可以去送你的那个是一样的。
One difference with cremation is that you can't place loved items into the machine with the body. It will just be the body in the machine.
这个它跟火葬有一个不同啊，然后就是说它不可以跟火葬一样的，就是把你心爱的物品一起放进去。它这个仪器呢是可以是那个仪器啊，不可以有其他的物品放进去。
So costs. Right now, about 43% of Washington funeral homes provide this option.
然后在费用方面呢，现在目前在华盛顿州的那个殡仪馆只有大概4成左右的那个殡仪馆提供这个选择。
And prices can range from $1,195 to $6,490 for an average in the state of $2,572. So again, encouraged to do your price analysis of funeral homes as you're choosing who services you'd like to use.
然后价格的话呢，就是它从1195到那个6490元不等，然后平均的那个价格呢，大概是2572左右。还是像之前说的，要建议去做一些价格的分析，然后去那个殡仪馆使用他们的服务。
Okay, back to familiar territory. Full body burials, very traditional, still quite common.
然后我们现在回到我们比较熟悉的一个殡葬的方式，然后这个呢就是全身的遗体土葬，然后这个呢是比较传统的，也是现在目前来说还是比较普遍的方式。
Here in Washington, burials are only allowed in established cemeteries. We're one of the few states that do not actually allow burial on private land. If you wanted to do that, you'd have to apply for your property to be made into a cemetery, which is a very costly and involved process. So it would need to be in an established cemetery.
目前在华盛顿州呢，我们也是仅允许在指定的公墓里面去进行一个土葬然后我们也是属于少数的在那个不允许在个人的土地上面去做这个土葬的一个州份之一。然后在未向我们州政府去申请注册你自己的土地作为公墓的情况下呢，我们是不可以在自己的土地上面做那个土葬的。然后，如果是把自己的土地申请为公墓的话呢，那么这个过程其实是非常繁复，还有也是非常昂贵的。
If you elect to be embalmed or to have your loved one embalmed, just know that is the right of your choice. As embalming is not required by state law or really any national law. That is just an optional decision. Some cemeteries may have requirements for that they have decided to implement as their own business practice, but embalming is by no means legally required.
然后如果你是想要做那个防腐的话呢，那个不属于那个州法律规定的必须要做的。但是如果你的家人想要去选择去做这个防腐的动作的话呢，他们是有这个权利去做这个选择的。然后因为这个呢，它也是不属于那个州法律的规定范围之内，所以如果你想要去做这个防腐的这个选择的话呢，你要看的就是那个联邦的法律。
And to clarify, embalming is a process that uses chemicals to provide some preservation of your body a little bit longer than what would happen if you were buried naturally, though you are going to eventually still go through the decomposition process, even if you elect to be embalmed.
防腐这个的程序呢，就是解释一下，它就是使用一些化学的物质，然后去帮你的遗体去做些保留。然后这个的保留呢，它可能会比自然你埋葬的时候呢，它的那个分解的过程可能要长一点，但是你的遗体最终还是会分解的。
If you or your loved one are a veteran, the Veterans Administration does provide free burials for veterans at their national cemeteries. The one pictured here with the beautiful Mount Rainier in the background is Tahoma National Cemetery, just south of Renton, and it's a really lovely place if you are a veteran and want to be buried.
然后，如果你是退伍军人或你的家人是退伍军人的话呢，你可以选择免费葬在那个国家的公墓里面。然后，我们那个图片上面显示呢，就是我们华中一个那个退伍军人的一个国家的公墓。然后它是在那个 Renton 市以南的一个地方。然后背后可能都看到呢，就是我们很漂亮的那个Mount Rainier。
And full body burial typically includes being embalmed or not being embalmed, placed into the casket of your choice. Could be metal, could be wood. If you'd elect to be dressed, some people elect to go nude, and then placed into the grave or the niche at the cemetery.
丧葬的方式是可以跟随个人的意愿的。比如说，你是选择木质棺，还是选择金属棺？选择着装还是不着装？这些都是个人的选择，都可以操作。
But another option is what's considered green burial. And so green burial is offered in Washington. There are 6 dedicated cemeteries to it, but more and more traditional cemeteries are also offering, if not full green burial, then modified versions to keep up with times.
就是说我们华州其实还有另外一种叫绿色的土葬。现在我们有6个，就是说指定的绿色土葬的那个墓园。还有一些就是传统的墓园也慢慢的跟进时代，也开始提供这些这些服务。
Slightly different than the other type of burial. With green burial or eco-friendly burial, no chemical embalming will be involved. You will be natural with your placement. You are placed into a biodegradable container.
也就是说，这个是属于环境比较友好的一种丧葬模式，它不添加任何的那个化学的防腐剂。遗体呢会被放在一个可以生物降解的容器当中，直接放入地下，并且呢，在通常的情况之下呢，它的标识是用石头和本土的一些植物来，而不是使用从前的那种所谓的墓碑之类。
They say a biodegradable container rather than a casket because there are a wider range of choices of how you are placed into your grave with green burial. With a more standard burial, you do have that more traditional casket of metal or wood, and the cemetery will place a concrete or other solid material like stone around you for a vault.
我们刚才讲的这个生物可降解的容器，它是比较的，就是说多样的。不像传统的是用那种我们说的棺木吧，可以是金属的，也可以是木头的。墓园的话会把那个传统的那种棺木放在那个地下，然后另外还要用一些比如说砖石料来堆砌在那个棺木的周围。
Whereas with a green or eco-friendly burial, you are going to be placed directly in the ground. There will be no vault in the grave. And then, yeah, your container, it could be a casket. If it's green burial, then that would typically be wood that doesn't have any metal or glues. But I have even been involved with the green burial. A woman from Korea who had brought this beautiful burial shroud over, or her grandma did. And she was actually just wrapped in a shroud, casket, and placed directly into her grave in that shroud.
他刚刚讲到是他亲眼所见的一个绿色土葬的一个例子，有一个去世的韩国裔的一个女士，她用的是家人给她带来的一些什么，就是很美丽的灌木丛缠绕在营地当中，直接埋入地下，而不是葬入一些所谓的一些木质的一些棺木当中。所以他对于那个我们的主讲人来说，他的印象非常深刻，也觉得这样非常的美。
And then, as you've seen at most cemeteries, they're grave markers, made out of marble or stone. But usually with a green burial, that could still be an option. But a lot of those cemeteries do place a rock or a plant native to the area in lieu of that traditional marker. This photo is actually one of the green burial sites here in Washington. And as you can see, there's no burial markers that are standing up like there would be at a traditional cemetery.
就是传统的墓园当中，大家都知道是用墓碑来做标志，而那个在绿色土葬之中，大家都是通常是用石头或者一些植物，或者是并没有很清晰的一些标识来代替原先的像所谓的墓碑。大家看到的这张图片就是一个例子，就是这是一个绿色土葬的墓园，大家其实看不到任何就是说立于地面的一些标识。
Here's a couple depictions of those green burial container options. So this one on the left is more in the shape of a casket or coffin, and that is woven out of natural plant materials.
大家看一下图片当中，就是一些绿色土葬的一些棺木的一些模板哈。比如说像左边的这个的话，它其实是就是藤条的，然后藤条的棺木的上面又装饰有一些自然的花草。
And on the right is a shroud made out of cotton. You can see it has straps because often with green burial, rather than in a standard burial where you have the service and the family leaves and the grounds crew uses machinery to lower you.
大家看一下，那右边的这个其实就是用那个棉布包裹的一个遗体哈。它跟传统的不一样，传统的要用机器把那个遗体进行那种什么，就是安放升降，而这个就是直接置于地上。
With green burial, often the cemetery will allow the family to hand lower in a more, long ago when we used to handle this ourselves as families methods. So the straps are there to help the family lower the body into the grave.
大家看到这个就是右边的这个，就是说家人的话用这个棉布做的这个，就是拉的这种像绳索一样的东西，就可以轻轻的把那个亲人的遗体置于地上。就是我们其实是从古到今很多时候家庭使用的一种方式，就是轻轻的置于地上。
Whether it's a standard burial or a green burial, cemetery information is the same. So when you purchase a plot in a cemetery, it's a right to burial. You're not actually buying a piece of real estate. The cemetery holds ownership over that land.
我讲一下墓园哈，在公土里面，你付钱购买的这个地块，只是说是可以就是进行土葬，你拥有这个埋葬遗体的这个权利，但这个不是房地产，你并不拥有这块土地的所有权。
And as they are the landowner, they get to make their own rules. So as I mentioned earlier, they might require, depending on the type of burial at their cemetery, embalming. They also may restrict the number of burials per plot. Some cemeteries have only one person per plot, and some will offer stacked burials, so spouses can be in the same grave together.
公墓的所有者土地的所有者，也就是规则的制定者，他们可以制定一些规则，比如说这个地块应该怎么用，在某一个地块上最多可以有多少的这种墓穴，或者是说，夫妻同墓的这个情况应该怎么进行，怎么处理。
And as mentioned earlier, the cemetery may require that grave lining, the vaults, again, made out of cemetery or stone, or pardon me, cement or stone.
还有比如说像我们刚刚讲到的墓碑的种类啊、大小这些东西，墓园的所有者他们将会进行具体的那个限制。
And they often require those vaults as an aesthetic preference because you may see at old cemeteries, the graves have sunken, the grass is lumpy. With a vault, it prevents that sinking and that settling of the grave in the dirt. So it helps with their lawnmower and landscaping processes. It's not really serving any other purpose besides helping the grounds crew with their mowing.
就是墓园的主人，他们会对于那个墓地的地基什么方面有一些具体的一些规划，这样子防止会出现的一些因为挖掘的话，会造成的一些升降啊、地穴的升降啊、地穴的陷落呀、这些问题。
And again, they might also have different rules on what sort of monument or grave marker you can use. Some I've seen allow flowers, while also some say no glass vases, no showy things on the grave, whereas other ones do allow families to place meaningful items and upkeep the grave.
他们的就是各种规则会比较的细化，比如说我们刚才说到墓碑的问题大小啊。另外的话，有的时候他们有的地方是不允许放鲜花的，有的地方他们可能不允许放那个玻璃的花瓶之类，他们都会有具体的一些规定。
And unlike funeral homes, which are required to, oh boy. Unlike funeral homes that are required to provide a price list, federally, cemeteries are actually not required to provide a price list. So you kind of have to sit down and discuss things with them rather than seeing a printed out list of what you'll be charged.
殡仪馆的话呢，你如果打电话去咨询，他是必须要给你个价目表的。但是墓地的话，他们没有这个要求，就是说他们可以不提供价目表。
All right, next option. I don't know how good. Natural organic production. This was this was pursued beginning in 2017 under the name Urban Death Project.
我们现在来讲一下，另外一种丧葬模式叫自然有机还原它就做这个一个公益公司的话，它成立于2017年，正规的名字叫城市死亡专案。
And it was called that because the originator was looking for a way to provide a similar option to grain burial in an urban environment that has less and less land available for cemeteries.
这个方式的发明人，他的灵感来自于绿色土葬，他想可以发明一种跟绿色土葬相近的一个模式，并且适用于像那个城市，在城市之中，我们可以获得的土地越来越少的这种情况。
And it was actually legalized along with alkaline hydrolysis back in 2019. So the first facility offering this option opened here in Seattle in 2020, and that is the first facility in the United States.
它与碱性水解这种方式是同时合法化的，2019年，然后2020年有了第一批，然后我们这个华盛顿州是全国第一家拥有这个自然有机分解公司的州。
And these pictures, this is Katrina Spade, who came up with the idea for the process and one of the vessels for her facility, as well as the other facility that we have. I think there's four businesses that provide this option currently. So you can see there are differences in their containment, but it is the same process.
大家看一下这两种上下两张图片是两种不同的这种，就是说结构哈，但是它们的过程是一样的，就是自然的分解。
And the process very similarly to regular composting because this option is gaining the nickname human composting. So you can see in front of Katrina, there are natural materials such as alfalfa grass that's placed with the body to help speed up that process that would happen naturally underground. This process takes about 2 months.
这个的话这跟堆肥的过程是非常相似的，所以它的另外一个名称叫人体的堆肥。大家看丁香图片上面附带的一些物质哈，这个过程的话大概要用2个月左右把人的遗体那个自然的分解。
It's offered in about 40% of funeral homes in the state currently. And as with the other options, the prices range very widely from about $3,000 to almost $8,000.
同样就是我们州的殡仪馆约有40%他们是可以操作的啊，其中有通过4家承包商做这个自然的分解，价格呢可能会从近3000元啊到近7800元，所以大家还是要比个价。
Okay, super quickly. So you do have the option to have your care and funeral held at home rather than in a funeral home or mortuary setting. You can still have the funeral home be involved, such as filing the paperwork for the death certificate and final disposition paperwork, but the family can mainly do everything else, the dressing, washing, having the body at home, up to 3 days here in Washington State if you have some sort of cooling method. And you are also allowed as the family to transport to the crematory or cemetery rather than having the funeral home do it.
然后在葬礼的那个处理上面呢，也是有一些其他的选择的，比方说由你的家人来去做一些处理，然后殡仪馆不参与，或者是殡仪馆根据你的家人的那个需要去提供一些相关的支持啊，然后他们可以帮你做的呢，就比方说如果你需要他们去帮你去做那个死亡证的话，那个可以让他们去来帮你做。如果家人在那个遗体的处理上面有什么是他们愿意自己做的，比方说清洁或穿衣啊这些东西可以让家人来做。然后如果他们想要那个殡仪馆人员去帮助服务这一部分的话，也是可以的。然后那个遗体的暂养的话，我们是可以选择在家里进行，或者是做这个的程序。然后家人也是可以选择去自己把那个遗体送到那个合葬场或者是公墓里面去做埋葬。
And then lastly, you do also have the option to donate your body to academic institutions, such as these schools shown below, like the UW. There are for-profit body donation programs. There is also a mortuary school here in Washington called Lake Washington Technical, and highly recommended that you reach out to these institutions before death to learn what their policies and acceptance procedures are.
最后一个呢，我们也还是有一个全身遗体捐献的一个这样子的选择。然后我们在华中呢，它有一些学术性的机构，比方说像华大这样子，你可以去选择去把遗体去捐赠，他们去做一些相关的学术研究，或者呢，也是有一些立的那种的遗体的捐赠机构然后也有一些我们有殡仪馆的学校叫那个华盛顿技术学院你在那个选择去做那个全身遗体的捐献的时候呢，你需要去想一下自己想要去选择怎么做，然后去问他们相关的那个机构的一些的就是怎么去申请的。
Since I'm absolutely running out of time, I'm going to quickly go through the wrap-up slides here. But I did want to say that if you don't want to donate your full body, there are organ and tissue donations out there as well through programs such as Life Center Northwest. And again, highly recommended to reach out to those programs ahead of time and discuss with your families so that you know what the acceptance policies are for these businesses.
因为现在时间比较紧迫一点，所以我们就很简单的说一下最后的一个选择，就是那个器官或者是那个组织的捐献。然后如果你是决定那个捐献你的部分的器官或组织的话呢，我们是有一些机构去接受相关的捐献的，比方说有包括那个 Life Center Northwest 这样子的一个机构。 如果你是想要去做这个选择的话呢，会比较建议你提前跟那些机构去做一些询问，还有跟你家人去沟通，看看你们相关的那个他们相关的一些的捐献的那个程序是怎么做的。
Okay, so as I've been saying through the whole thing, there's some decisions to make. Sit down today or the next week, have this digest in your brain, start talking to family. I know it can be kind of a difficult conversation to have, but it certainly helps with when the time comes. Like I said at the beginning, help it feel less like an emergency and less pressure.
然后我们就是今天讲了那么多呢，是有很多的那个选择是需要你去做的，所以你可能就是今天或那个下周找个时间去把这些的信息消化一下，然后去思考一下选择是什么，然后提前跟家人去讨论一下，看看你之后的那个安排是怎么样的。那么在那个时候到来的时候呢，你可能就比较不会觉得这是一个紧急的情况。
It's also important to discuss what you'd like with family ahead of time, just so that you're prepared for the costs, because as mentioned, the costs can vary quite considerably from funeral home to funeral home. And you may elect to set some money aside ahead of time within a life insurance policy or a separate savings account that who will be in charge of your funeral arrangements has access to.
然后这个跟家人讨论的其中一个就是说那个葬礼的费用就像我们刚才说的呢，葬礼的那个费用呢，它可能就先数的比较多，然后范围是比较宽广的，所以我们提前规划的一个原因呢，就是说比方说看看你那个钱呢是打算之后是怎么去做一个处理。可能你现在就买一些寿险去准备那个葬礼的钱，或者是你现在有一个单独的那个储存的账户，把那个钱先放在一边。然后，如果你是指派了谁去帮你做这个处理的话呢，可能就是说让他们知道有这笔钱存在。
And I've said it already a few times, so I don't want to elaborate again, but shop around, see what funeral home matches your budget and your needs. And legally, they are required to provide you with that printed price list when you approach them about their services.
然后刚才已经有说过几次了，然后也是希望重申一次比较重要的一点呢，就是你可能要做一些相关的那个价格的比较像刚才说的，他们的那个宾馆的价格呢范围很宽，然后就是在你去问他们去做一些咨询的时候呢，他们是必须给你提供一个打印出来的一个他们价格列表的。所以就是比较建议你去按照自己的选择，还有去那个预算去选择一家适合你的宾馆。
Factors in choosing funeral home: price, quality, reputation, ownership, what sort of services they offer. Do they meet your needs, your religious practices, your family's desires? And where are they located? Is that going to be convenient for your family as they need to go back and forth and meet with the funeral directors?
然后在殡仪馆的选择上面呢，我们可能需要考虑的因素就包括列出来的一些价格、品质、他们的口碑所有权，然后他们提供的一些服务和设施比方说，如果你自己是有什么需求的，或者是你是有什么宗教信仰的，或者是家人有什么偏好的，所以就是看看他们有没有提供相对应的那个服务还有设施。另外一个呢，就是地点你就是在丧礼的处理过程当中呢，家人可能需要多次的往返那个殡仪馆，所以你那个地点是需要考虑的因素。
I don't know if I have time to get into this, but we often get asked about prepaying. So that's up to you. Just know that the prepayment does not lock in the price of the funeral home.
另外一个比较常问的问题呢，就是你是否应该去预先支付那个费用预先支付费用呢，不代表说你那个价格就已经定下来。
And one instance where it is encouraged to do a prepayment with the funeral home is if you're on Medicaid and you want to do a spend down, you can do an irrevocable prepayment to use some of those funds.
其中一个可能你会考虑去预先支付费用的，就是你本身在考虑做那个白卡的那个资产的 花费啊，就可能说你可能预先支付给殡仪馆的那个费用呢，是你不可以再拿回来的，那么它就可以不算在你的那个资产里面。
And again, your options for prepayment would be, say, that savings account that your loved one has access to, that you place money aside, or a life insurance policy, those sorts of options.
然后支付的那个方式呢，可能就是说刚才提到的，你有一个储存的账户，然后预先把那个钱去放进去，然后之后有需要的时候家人可以去取用，或者是说你可以去买一个人寿的保险，然后那个保险的费用去覆盖你的这样的费用。
Okay, so if you hadn't picked up on it, People's Memorial just highly encourages you to think about what you want. Consider what I've told you today. Talk about those wishes with loved ones. It can be a difficult conversation, but ultimately it does make it easier for everyone when the time unfortunately comes. Put it in writing. We have those handy forms translated in the back. And, just you get it done and then you don't have to think about it again until the time comes.
就是我们的人民纪念协会呢，就鼓励你去想一下你要怎么去做，然后就是把你的想法跟你心爱的人去讨论一下，然后最终呢就把那些的选择去把它写下来。那么在如果那天到来的时候呢，你就不用说到时候才去迷茫的去做一些的选择。然后我们今天后面呢也是有一些那个中文的翻译版本，然后也欢迎你去拿那些资料去看一下。然后就是你事先把这些工作都做好了，在那天到来的时候呢，你就不用去做这个事情了嘛。
Okay, thanks so much for having me here at CISC. Thank you to our translators. I do know that I brought us right up to the end time, so I won't be offended if you need to leave before the Q&A. Do I still have time for Q&As? You got something happening after this? Yeah.
Question?
Yeah, and then if you don't have time to ask me, take down my contact info. Our motto is no questions unanswered, so feel free to reach out if you can't ask today.
然后非常感谢大家今天让我来这边跟大家做这个分享，也是非常感谢我们今天的翻译去帮我们做一个翻译因为我们今天的时间呢就已经是比较没有时间剩下来了，所以如果你现在需要离开的话呢也是没有问题的。然后我上面呢有我的联系方式，如果你后续有什么问题没有办法去提问的话呢，非常欢迎跟我们联系。
Okay, questions?
I have a question. If 火葬跟水葬佢嗰啲骨灰係咪會可以抌落海？冇問題。
So for both the ashes from like the cremation and the hydrolysis, we are able to put the ashes into the ocean without any problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can put them straight into the water. Or if you do it off of the ferry, they will require that biodegradable urn. But yes, if you do it yourself off a personal boat, you can put the remains directly into the water.
因為啲魚食咗，我驚佢污染。
My concern is that the fish is the ashes.
Oh.
That's a good concern. Yeah, I don't know if they would eat it because they probably just perceive it as more similar to like rocks, or sand. So yeah, they probably won't try to eat
Because
it.
I like fish, and then I like fish.
I have a question. Yeah, my ID card is a donor. If I die, should they give to the UDOC or something like that?
Yeah, no, actually, that is kind of a misconception. Even if your ID says that you're a donor,
Yeah.
you still have to make arrangements ahead of time, typically with those organizations. They won't just automatically donate you to a program.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's donor or
Yeah.
I think when you go 这方面的是一个器官的捐赠者的话呢，那么是不是我死亡之后的如果自动的去捐给一些的话，大家学术机构？然后那个答案呢是不是的，即使你的介绍上面是有一个说你是器官捐赠者，这不代表说你的之后会去捐赠给任何的机构的。
Thank you.